But first, I want to start out with a test of your balance so that you know a little bit, and then we'll go through all of the details. So, hold on, let me get my timer ready. You don't have to do this, but it's kind of an interesting one, and you'll know your results yourself. So I'm going to have everybody stand up. And when I say go, without holding on to anything, I want you to balance on one leg. And I'm gonna do every 5 seconds. And when you sit down, notice how long you had stayed, and then look up at the chart for where you are on the balance, okay? Everybody ready? Okay, get ready, get set, go. Everybody on one leg. We're at 5 seconds. And 10 seconds. 15 seconds. 20. 25. And 30. Okay, great. Somehow my slides did not say right. It doesn't have the right information on the front. It's never done that on the top. But anyway, we'll still manage through. It'll be just fine. I was just noticing that. Anyway, so you want to look at, if you're under 10 seconds, there are some things you can do right now from the class today to start improving your balance. And even if you're over 30 seconds, still keeping some of these things in mind and keeping those skills up will help. But you may have been shocked to find out that it was a little harder than you realized. Yeah, because you don't really notice till you have a problem that your balance is changing. It can come up and surprise you very quick, and that happens to our residents as well. And so even if they think their balance is fine, you might still want to kind of keep them in mind when you start to learn some of this stuff. Because if they're starting to do some of the things that I'm saying right now, their balance will be greatly improved. I really am upset about my slides not working on the top. I don't know why it got onto there. I don't really remember what I wrote because I was going to read it. So we'll just go on to the next one. So these are the way that your body senses balance. We have muscle strength, proprioception, the vestibular system, and posture. So being strong, having a healthy proprioception, and that's the way you sense your environment. A healthy vestibular system, which is how your body puts your balance in relation to where your head is, and also your posture. And so as I'm going through in detail about these things, I want you to think about these things in relation to what you see with our residents and anyone you're working with. One thing that has a very bad impact on balance is sitting. It is the worst thing you can do for your health and for your balance. But think about our residents and think about how much time they spend sitting. Think about it. Would you say 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% of the day? The more they are seated, the more their balance is starting to decline. What happens is that we decrease in activity over the years and our balance gets worse. We then notice our balance gets worse and we think, oh, I shouldn't be as active. And so we're creating this vicious cycle. So as our balance gets worse, we decide to be more sedentary, not realizing that sometimes it was caused because they started out being more sedentary. Because what do you do when you retire? You sit more, or hopefully not, but some people do. And it really works like this. Use it or lose it. It's with our brain, it's with our muscles, and it's definitely with our balance. And so what you don't realize is that when you spend 10 days, just 10 short days of not exercising and not having a lot of activity, and you get a 10% loss of total lean leg muscle. 10% after 10 days. If you spend 3 days in a hospital, you have that same 10% loss. And what they're finding, one part of balance is strength. It's other things as well. So that 10% loss in muscle mass can play a huge role in balance, and rather not, they want to continue to be active. Because think about it. You've spent 10 days, you've lost 10% of your muscle, or you've been in the hospital. Do you want to get up and do what you used to? Because now it's a fight. And so when you see that a resident had to be in the hospital or had to be sedentary for 10 days, encouraging to get up and move, even for the smallest thing. You don't think it's having that big of a difference, but it is, because every minute sitting is taking their balance and every other part of their health downhill. So this one was supposed to say the way of the samurai. And since the top part is missing, I'm going to go on to the next slide. Okay, so there was a young samurai and he wanted to learn to become a good swordsman. So he goes to the samurai master and he says, well, what can I do to be the best swordsman there is? And the master says, okay, you see the line on that Satsumi mat? I want you to walk that line and not shift from it every day. And keep practicing it. So the samurai goes and he tries it once, twice, and he's like, this is so easy. What does he have me doing this for? He comes back to the samurai master and he says, that's easy, I can do that, no problem. We don't need to practice it anymore. And the master says, are you sure? And he says, yes, it's easy, I've got it down. And so the samurai master says, okay, then you have mastered the sense of balance. Because what they have found is that balance may actually be the sixth sense. Not ESP, but balance. Because without balance, so much of what you can do and how you sense the world is not working for you. So in a lot of the Asian cultures, balance is another one of your senses, like hearing, sight, smelling, taste, and then there's balance. So the samurai master says, okay, it sounds like you have good control over your sense of balance. So he takes him to this big gorge, 100 feet drop off down below, and there's rushing water, and there's a tree connecting one end to the other. And he says, okay, if you can walk that narrow mat, walking across this gorge should be easy, and I just want you to walk across it. And the samurai gets up and he stands onto that log, and he takes a couple of steps, and he gets real wobbly, and he says, I can't do it. And the samurai says, well, you haven't mastered it. Because balance is a sense, and it's a lot about what you're perceiving about your world. It's a lot about what you believe. Also, balance and vision are really intertwined. So by changing his belief, because there was a lot on the line if he fell off, and having his vision impacted by balance because of the rushing water under the tree, his balance couldn't perform, even though in a secure environment and a harder environment, because it was more narrow, he did just great. Think about our residents. How do they shift the minute they start to think, I'm getting older, I've seen my friends fall, I've almost fallen? Their perception and their belief about their ability to walk and move goes downhill, and they start to have that problem, just like that samurai thinking of walking across that tree, because that tree was so much wider than the narrow mat. And it really is applicable to our residents, don't you think? Another way you might see our residents, I want you to think of the last time it iced. Could be a long time ago, and I want you to think of getting out of your car and having to walk on it. What did you do? How did you feel? Now, think of our residents who've been sedentary for a while and are worried about a balance. Do they not look very similar to the person trying to walk on ice? It's because our minds play such a role in balance. And when we can't trust our body to move us, we start doing all of these different things, like walking on ice and not being able to walk on something larger that you could do if you felt safe. So what happens is we get that fear of falling. We then decrease our activity. We get weaker. We can then get more of an increased risk of falling, and then we fall. It's this vicious cycle. And so one way to break that cycle is to give the resident a perception of, you can work on this, you can improve this, you have control on this, we can help you, and to get their mind in the right place, just like you would do the samurai so he could walk across that gorge. Getting their mind in the right spot so that they can stay more active, or getting them help. But breaking that inactivity loop is your number one thing you need to do. Any questions so far? Seeming okay? Okay, so let's get a little bit deeper into how we sense balance. We have our vestibular system, and that's our self to our earth. And in your ears, you have a sensory that helps tell in relation to your head. We also have vision, object to object. What they found is that vision is the most important part of balance. And we're going to test that here in a little bit. And then proprioception, the way that we sense by our muscles our relation to the ground, if something's around us. And so all three of those things have to be working really well to have good balance. And age starts to change a lot of these systems. With our vestibular system, adults above 70 years of age have a 40% reduction in the sensory cells in their ears. So that means that their ability to know where their head in space is going down. But working on it causes that reduction to come back up. So it's back to that use it or lose it. If you just ignore that there might be a problem, it will have that 40% drop. But if you're paying attention, so when you're with the residents and you're asking them, hey, move your head around, nod back and forth, that's really good for the vestibular system. So every little movement, even just through their head, makes a difference. Another way to look at the vestibular system is like it's a level. It shows the brain the position of the head, and it does not provide any information about the body. So anything that you're doing that challenges that level to work is improving the vestibular system. So shaking the head, nodding the head. So when you're talking to them, you say, hey, nod at me if you understand instead of talking. That gets that vestibular system going, and it's something so simple. Or, hey, look that way, turn, any of those things. The next one is our proprioception, and that is the way we sense our place in space. And that also reduces as we get older. So I want everybody to stand up again. Okay, I want you to keep your heels down and lean as far forward as you can. Now lean as far back as you can. Can you feel your body trying to right you? Now lean to one side and lean to the other side. Okay, your vestibular system's trying to put you back in center. Unless your vestibular system isn't working as well, which is what happens as you age. Okay, now bring one foot up. Balance on one foot. Can you feel your feet moving? That's your body working on your proprioception, trying to tell you, okay, this is how we're going to do it. Something's missing here. And that's the way that we sense our place in space. One way to help, so you can sit back down. So one way to help is to have them lean a little bit forward, lean a little bit back. Anything that has them sensing with all of their muscles their environment. Because if they're not doing that as much, their balance is going down. Yeah.
So on the vestibular, does that help with them not having them nod their head or move it? Does that help sitting down also?
Yes, you can do that sitting down. Because the vestibular system isn't connected to the body, kind of, so to speak. I'm being, yeah, either would work. So you could do that. And you could even have them work proprioception while seated. Lean forward, lean back, side to side, feel your feet. All of it can be done seated, and all of it will be helpful. There's also two different types of balance. Dynamic balance is when you're using balance in movement, or bringing and picking something up. Static balance is when you're still. You're standing on one foot, both feet, but you're not in movement. They found that static balance is harder and it decreases with age. And so when you have a resident that's standing still waiting for you, they're more challenged. It's harder for them. Just like when you were trying to stand in that measure of balance by being on one foot, it's harder to be still. So if you have somebody that's waiting on you, you might have them move a little if you're worried about their balance, because static, being still, is going to be harder. Also, with dynamic balance, when you're moving faster at a regular tempo, you have more stability. And when you're slower, you have more of a time when that static balance is coming in, so you're a little more challenged. What is the first thing you see with a resident when they start to have a balance problem? They slow down. And that moment they slow down, their stability has gone down. It's that normal pace. We're built for having a little bit of speed when we move, and that static balance is challenged. And we did this earlier, it's the postural sway, but also having somebody do a little bit of time standing still or on one foot and the other can help improve static balance. Just like you felt that, so if you didn't like your time balanced on one foot, if you practice it and you spend the next 3 weeks practicing it, you will notice that your static balance gets better. It decreases with age, but if you start using it, it improves. So, if you want to make a change or you want to make a change with our resident, have them practice standing still for a little bit where you can help them, or stand on one foot, all where it's very controlled and safe. Also keeping as strong as possible. So we lose that muscle mass if we sit for 10 days or we're in the hospital for 3 days. But as our age, we lose 1% a year starting at middle age of muscle mass. But it doesn't have to be like that. If people are doing any type of strength work, strength training, that muscle mass starts to come back. And some of the really interesting studies that have been done, someone who's exercising, when they cut and look at the muscle fiber in a leg, they cannot tell the difference between a 70-year-old and a 45-year-old if that 70-year-old has continued exercising. The great thing about muscle and strength is that at any age and stage, You start doing some type of strength training and our residents start doing it, they will start increasing their muscle mass because our muscle system doesn't know age unless you aren't using it. It's completely a use it or lose it system. You quit using it and that muscle mass will go away. You start using it and it'll start building that muscle mass up. But for balance, think about it. If you're not real strong, how are you going to do with balance? Or if something comes up your way, are you going to be able to put one leg out there to catch yourself? So keeping your muscles that surround each joint as strong as possible is very important. And the next part is posture. For a lot of people, as they get older, posture starts to change. Have you ever thought about what happens, though? Our head weighs quite a bit. And for every little bit forward, we add more weight. Up to 42 pounds if your head's really out there. Think about what that does to their center of gravity. So a good cue when you're just with them or walking with them can be, hey, stand up tall, reach up tall, and reminding them, hey, stand up, because what happens is you start to lose balance. You start to look down because you want to watch. You want to make sure that nothing's going to come up that's going to throw you a curveball. And so then they get that forward head posture, and all of this weight is forward of their center of gravity. Because the body always follows the head. And so therefore, if your head's forward, your tendency is to go forward. Also, as we get older, another thing that impacts our balance is that our muscles get tighter. They're not stretching. A lot of them aren't doing a stretching thing. And you want to think of, okay, think about if you were to wrap your foot with an ACE bandage in your ankle. Would you be able to walk? Have you ever done that? And so making sure that they're moving their feet and their ankles, lifting them up, tapping them, so that they keep that flexibility. Because so much of an important part of your gait is being able to lift and lower your foot. And so just having them tap their toes while they're waiting, if they're seated, lift their heels, things like that to keep that balance going. I'm sorry, my slides are also messed up. It's never happened before. So, if you are working with a resident, you want to keep them moving as much as possible. That's your number one goal because of the inactivity and the way that works. You can do little things like keeping their proprioception and their vestibular system moving. But then you can also, if you notice any of this, recommend them into physical therapy. And at the wellness department, we're doing 5 classes a day. And we will always find a way to get them in. We also offer free personal training. And so if you have somebody that you think, okay, they're about to get back into independent living, they've been so inactive or worried about their balance, you can always call me. We'll put them with a personal trainer and start working on all of these issues so that they can continue to move forward. We'll always help. So if you ever identify that and you know they're coming back into independent living, please use us. We really want to help them as much as possible. Skip that one. Okay, so a lot of things, times when I'm watching our residents, they have just different types of shoes. And they did a large study 2 years ago, and they had 250 men and women over the age of 65, and they were looking at what caused a fall. And they found that 30% of them were due to the types of shoes that they were wearing. And after reading that study, I started just watching all of our residents in their shoes. And you want to always look down at their shoes, especially if you're really worried, but make sure that they fit snugly and that they are appropriate for the environment. a lot of times you think, oh, they're good. They have the athletic shoes, but if they've got that really rubbery and they're on carpet, they can get caught a little easier. Just like if you were shuffling your feet with a rubber sole shoe, it sticks. And so you might recommend that they use a different type of shoe. Another thing is making sure that they have some type of fastener on the heel. Because a lot of times I see our residents, they're like, oh, it's hard to put it on. I can't get my shoe on. And so they put on the little mules where there's no heel, and that can also be a big trip hazard. Or they have shoes and they're real wide on the side, causing them to slip based on catching that. So there's a lot of things to look at with the shoes. So always just look down and notice. That they have a good fastening mechanism. They're slip resistant, but not too much where they catch, because that can be a big problem. And that their heel's not too high. And lastly, medication can play such a role. And if you're worried about it, you can always send them to their pharmacist. But diuretics, you wouldn't think that a diuretic, but that can have a 7% increased risk. And then opioid painkillers, of course, can have a 10%. Anti-inflammatories, 21%. Blood pressure, sleeping pills, antidepressants have 68%. So if you're worried about it, you can always say, hey, have you talked to your doctor about your medications and balance? They might be able to make a definite switch. So when working with the resident, I want you to think about keeping them as active as possible, because that makes such a big difference. And also about their medications, their shoes, and if anything, we're always around to help get them and keep them moving. Any questions so far? No, that's what I had. I think my slides really ended up a little different, because 3 of them are missing. I don't know how it did that, but you live and you learn. So anyway, well, thank you.